pronouns. By day, I work in healthcare compliance. I do disability access compliance with a large healthcare organization. And in my background, I have been an executive director. So for Sassoon and anybody else who's running agencies, I feel your pain. Yes, I feel the pain. I've worked in nonprofits. I'm the former executive director of the Center for Independent Living in Berkeley, which some of you may be familiar with. And I'm just really excited to be here today. And so I will turn it back over to Bianca to do the group agreements, and then we'll into access check-in.
Great, thank you. So we're going to be using the LEARN model of group agreements. And this is a model that came out in the 80s, specifically for providers in the medical field working with cross-cultural clients. And so the LEARN model is by Berlin and Fowkes, and you can find more about them by looking up that citation. And here, the group agreements, the L is for listen with empathy and understanding. The E is to elicit relevant information and reflect your understanding. The A is to acknowledge similarities and differences in perceptions. The R is to respect the other person. And the N is to negotiate from a position of equity. And so what we'd like to do is have Yomi check in with people and see if folks agree to these group agreements for our time together. And you're welcome to put in suggestions in the chat box, and Yomi will read those out loud. So Yomi, can you check in with folks, please?
Yeah, so just maybe use the reaction button that's on the bottom of the Zoom to indicate a thumbs up or a hand clap for agreements. If you agree to be in this space together in this way. Or you can just signal, you know, yay, here for it, whatever you'd like to say in chat. So I'm going to do a thumbs up, and then I'm just going to try to scroll through and see. Maybe I missed some of the thumbs up, but I'm just going to assume that we're all good. We're all good with these agreements. Okay, Bianca. Oh, there we go. There was a little bit of a delay. So I'm seeing agreed. I'm seeing good mornings. Good morning to everybody. I'm seeing thumbs up. Thank you so very much.
Great, thanks folks. So we're gonna move along, and the first activity that we'd like to offer is something that only Yomi and I will do. And we're gonna model this for you during this training. And this is called an access check-in. And access check-ins are really, really common among disabled community members, Yomi and I being two of those community members. And what it offers us is the opportunity to share with participants in a space, as well as the facilitators, to do a body-mind scan and check-in, to acknowledge what may be showing up for us in our bodies or in our minds that we need to pay attention to so that we can stay present in the room. This is a process that also invites all of us, regardless of whether or not we have a disability, to acknowledge that we have bodies and minds and that we need to tend to our bodies and minds. And so I'll start, and then I'll turn it over to Yomi to share her access needs. And so my access needs for today look like I'm using two screens, so you might see my head move around. I'll also be going off camera from time to time just to get a break from looking at a screen while Yomi may be holding larger pieces of the training. And I'll probably be putting myself on mute from time to time as well. And that's all for taking care of myself, being able to move around, going to the bathroom if I need to. And I also have some water here, and you may see me looking down so I can text my partner to bring me more if I need some more water. So those are my access needs and how I will be meeting them. And I'm going to turn them over to Yomi to share what some of her access needs are.
Thank you, Bianca. So again, we're just modeling this, and maybe it's a practice. It's really a common accessibility practice that we do in disability community. And I think it's good just for any large group, any meeting, whether or not you identify as having a disability. So my access needs for me to be able to be comfortable and be present in the space, I have, you know, just age is catching up with me, and my eyesight isn't what it was even a year ago. So I have brand new glasses that I'm getting used to, but I have my notes off to the side. And so you will see me kind of looking off to the side for notes, and maybe not looking directly at the camera sometimes. I will similarly mute myself, so maybe I can clear my throat, blow my nose, or take a drink of water. I might go off camera. I have been in other meetings and presentations where sometimes I need to recline. So Bianca and I didn't do a visual description, so I'll do that really quickly. This is another access practice. I am a Black woman who uses a power wheelchair. I'm sitting in my wheelchair. I wear glasses. I have dark wavy hair that is pulled back off of my face. I'm positioned in my living room at home, like everybody has been for months and months and months. And there may be occasions where I will recline my wheelchair just to reposition myself to make myself more comfortable. And check, that's my access check-in.
Thank you, Yomi. So what you'll notice is how we talked openly about what our bodies need and also how we're going to be tending to them. So this is what an access check-in can look like. And we encourage you to consider offering these at your next group meeting or session that you have with your team members or with community members, and to hear what other people are sharing and what their needs may be. We're going to move along, and I'm going to turn it over to Yomi to guide us through this particular poll. And so for people who have never done a poll before on Zoom, what that looks like is Sassoon is our back channel person who's managing all of the breakout rooms and polls. And so when we're ready and we give Sassoon the okay, you will see something pop up in the middle of your screen if you're on a computer. If you are on a tablet or a cell phone, what that means is you may have to select the chat box or the more option and find that there. We will have this little thing pop up, and then we will read out loud the question as well as all of the options. Your responses, when you select them, are anonymous, which means that we won't know who made what choices during this process. So I'm going to turn it over to Yomi to guide us through this first poll.
Great. So Sassoon, if you could put the poll up. The poll will say, who is in the room and how do you classify your work? The choices are crisis intervention specialist, healthcare professional, mental health professional, public benefit specialist, social human service provider, community member, advocate, or educator, a member of law enforcement, or a prosecutor. If you don't see your area of work presented, then I'm sorry, we didn't put an other category, but maybe you can just indicate by a thumbs up that you, in the chat, that you represent a different a different work scope.
So we have about 50% who voted.
Okay, so
let me know when to end the polling.
Okay, so let's give it a few more seconds so that we can get 100%. Okay, I see a couple of hands going up in chat to indicate that maybe their scope of work is not represented. So Sassoon, can you let us know when we get to like 80%?
So the vote stopped, so I'm gonna just end polling.
Okay, so the results are, and I'm trying to look at this very closely, 42% of us in this space represent the social and human service provider category. We have mental health professionals representing 31%, crisis intervention specialists. We have community members, advocates, and educators. And we have healthcare professionals. And we also have law enforcement and prosecutors represented. So great. Thank you for that. It lets us know who's in the room. And if you're not on the list, just indicate with an emoji or a hand or something. I see somebody that indicated that their scope of work is not represented. So thank you for doing that. That just helps us know who's in the room. Next slide. So we're going to have a second poll. And this is for Bianca and I, just to understand what your thinking is around just the term disability. So we're going to offer multiple choice questions. Again, it will pop up in the middle of your screen. You can choose multiple answers. Your answers will be anonymous. And I'm going to put I won't put the choices in chat because I can just read them off the screen. Okay, second poll, please. So what is disability? A lived embodied experience, a community location from which to organize, a political location which overlaps, intersects, and responds to other political locations such as race, gender, class, ethnicity, an aesthetic from which we create practice and culture. We actually had more questions, but maybe they didn't fit on the poll, so we'll just go with these. This is cool. I'm seeing all the responses in real time. We're almost there. And I can read them again one more time. What is disability? It's multiple choice. You can choose more than one answer. A lived embodied experience, a community location from which to organize, a political location which overlaps, intersects, and responds to other political locations such as race, gender, class, ethnicity, an aesthetic from which we create practice, or all of the above.
Should I end it?
Let's give it 5 more seconds. Please vote if you haven't yet. Okay, we'll end it there. So great responses. Great responses. 53% of you said all of the above. 25% said a lived embodied experience. 18% said an aesthetic from which we create practice. And 3% picked the answer around the political location, which overlaps and intersects and responds to other political locations. And the answer is all of the above, or all of these, any of these. If you picked one or all, then you're right. Disability is so many things. It's all of these things. So thank you. All right. Let's move forward. Before we move forward, are there any responses to that poll? You can unmute yourself and give us quick feedback, or use the chat to tell us what some of those choices, how that hit you, if any of that surprised you, if any of it made you feel uncomfortable.
Can you go back to that slide?
Sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, so if we want to talk about this for a second.
Yeah, I would love for you
disability?
to talk about the aesthetic from which we can create practice and culture.
Yeah, so for Bianca and I, and for a lot of people that we're in community with, disability is both a political identity, it's a personal identity, but it's also a cultural identity. We have disability culture. We create practices like the access check-ins that we modeled for you, like the visual descriptions for when you're doing presentations, and that is so that anybody with a visual disability can see sort of get an idea of the person that's speaking. When you describe yourself, that is also an access practice that we create in community. And we have culture. We create art. We create ways of being together. And so that's what we mean by it's an aesthetic from which we create practice and culture. And then I do see a response in chat. It was interesting to learn that disability has so many identities. Absolutely. Yeah, interesting for me to learn it too. I'm still learning. Okay, let's move forward. Thank you for participating in that poll. And so now we're just going to roll into talking about disability and interpersonal violence. So I first want to acknowledge on behalf of myself and Bianca that we deeply appreciate the work that all of you do. We we are approaching this training not from a position of you don't know what you're doing or that we're trying to tell you that you're wrong or anything like that. We choose to believe that every single day that you show up to work, you're doing the very best that you can, that you are serving all of our communities to the best of your ability. And what we want to do is also not necessarily lecture you and tell you facts that you may already know, but just level set so that we're all approaching this training and this learning together from a certain set of facts. So some of what I may be going over with is probably going to be very familiar to you if you've been doing this work for a long time, and some of it may be surprising. So we're going to talk about disability and violence. So as many of you probably know, people with disabilities, and that is all types of disabilities, whether that be physical, mental, sensory, intellectual, face disproportionate rates of sexual and domestic violence. That abuse is premised on power and control, and people with disabilities often face very specific barriers to accessing support, and that makes them more vulnerable to abuse. And a high number of abuse victims who are disabled never report the incident. So I just thought it was really important to kind of level set with this basic set of facts. At the end of the training, like I said, like Bianca said, you will be receiving the slide deck with all of our sources cited so that you can look up any of these statistics for yourself. And I just want to say, law enforcement officials and service professionals may have limited experience serving crime victims with disabilities, and therefore may not understand how to provide appropriate support because it's experiential. If you don't have a lot of experience with a particular group or community, you don't sort of build that muscle around how to provide the best support. Many first responders have not received disability-specific training in the areas of crisis intervention, forensic interviewing, and accommodations. Next slide, please. And the next few slides will just sort of illuminate some of these statistics. So 1 in 2 disabled women have experienced domestic violence. That's twice the rate of non-disabled women. People with disabilities also face higher rates of sexual abuse than people without disabilities. And I don't know, and you can please interact with us in chat if you would like. There was an excellent National Public Radio report that came out, I think it was about a year ago, on violence experienced by people with intellectual disabilities. And that research showed that people with intellectual disabilities are sexually assaulted at a really high rate, 7 times more often than those without intellectual disabilities. Next slide, please. So this is just drilling home that information. It's very sobering statistics. People with developmental disabilities are 4 to 10 times more likely to be victims of crime than other people, and that's all types of crime. And they're more likely to be repeatedly victimized by the same person. But research has shown that more than 50% of those victims never seek help. Next slide, please. Children with disabilities are 3 times more likely than children without disabilities to be abused or victimized. So before I go into the types of abuse, was there anything about those statistics or those numbers that anyone would like to comment on or share?
I'd like to share.
Yes.
Yeah, my name's Samantha.
Can you just identify yourself? Is that Samantha? Oh, there you go. Hi, Samantha.
Hi, I'm Samantha. Yeah, I used to work in home as a. Oh, sorry, I'm here with. To my access, I am here with a family. So
All right.
if there's screaming and fun going on in the background, that is accurate.
Okay.
But I used to work in home as a behavioral technician. And one of these instances was revealed to me with our client who was about 12 and she never shared kind of the abuse or the inappropriate behavior that was that she experienced with anyone. And it took she told me after knowing her for a year, for a really long time, and she had communication was difficult for her. It was a challenge, and it was some of the things we were working on. So just with those statistics, it just really kind of hits home, like how safe someone has to feel, or the kinds that she was 12. We were talking a lot about growing up and becoming a woman, starting your period, all these things. And through those conversations, she's like, well, this happened once. And how lucky I was to be able to have her feel comfortable in that space. But these statistics are really eye-opening, that how vigilant we have to be, or how we have to have those conversations.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. And you're right. It's like we need to have those conversations, and we hope that through this training you start to understand sort of better, like, what are some of the approaches how to have those conversations, because it's hard, it's difficult with all victims, and people with disabilities may have different communication needs. So thank you for sharing that. So now we're just going to go into the types of abuse. And again, might be very familiar to you. So this is just a level set. Types of abuse that people with disabilities face can range from withholding treatment or care support. So this would be from a primary caregiver, a parent, a partner, sexual abuse, emotional abuse, economic abuse. So that could look like the abuser taking somebody's public benefits and using it on themselves and not on the other person, or withholding money from them. It could look like isolation, coercion, or threats. So threatening to have somebody institutionalized if they report the abuse. It could be ableism and belittling. And we're going to talk more. We're going to go deeper into ableism soon. And just minimizing the abuse, deflecting blame, gaslighting. And these are, I think, all tactics that I'm sure as service providers, you're very familiar with. So before I move forward to the next slide, does anybody have a question? Do you want me to go into a little bit more about types of abuse, or are we good? Let me just check the chat. Okay. Yeah, not all survivors are verbal communicators. Absolutely. And someone else says there are reports of high financial fraud in elders with disabilities. Yep, absolutely. Okay. So let's move forward to the next slide, please. So now we're going to go into our first activity. And so before we do this, you're going to go into breakout rooms. So most of you, Sassoon is going to randomly select you and put you in a breakout room so that you can talk amongst yourselves. If you are deaf and you're using the ASL, you need ASL interpreting, if you could please indicate that either in chat or by raising your hand, we're going to keep you together in a group. So while I read the instructions, that will just give Sassoon an opportunity to see who is communicating via ASL so that she can keep you grouped together.
Yomi, I thought we discussed that they will stay in the main room.
Yes.
With interpreters.
Yeah, just so that you know who to keep into the main room.
But they could also just decline to go to the breakout room.
You're right. Thank you for reminding me. Yep. You can just not accept the breakout room. Okay.
Okay?
Yeah.
Are we good?
We're good.
I'm gonna put, how about 6 people per room?
Yeah, so what I'm gonna do, we're going to read a scenario to you, and we want you to, as a group, discuss individual approaches, identify the issue, and I'm gonna put these instructions and the scenario in the chat.
I'll take care of that for you, Yomi. Don't worry about it. I'll do it.
Oh, okay, great. So we want you to generate a list of possible solutions, create a plan to implement, and then what we're hoping that you can do is select one person to share out, so you can volunteer somebody or select one person in your group to share out with the larger group. And this will be the same person who's going to share out when we do the second activity. So for the second activity, you're going to be with the same group.
Okay, again, if you are using ASL interpreters, please stay in the main room and decline the invitation to go to the
decline the invitation to be moved around.
Okay,
should
I
talk about the scenario so that we can get started? So you have a 24-year-old disabled client with cerebral palsy is referred to your agency for an intake. They are driven by someone who helps them check in with reception and will not leave their side. The question is, how do you handle this being a confidential intake? Are there any questions about that particular scenario before we put you in breakout groups?
And it's in the chat box. Thank you for writing that. So you will see the scenario and prompt in the chat box.
Yeah. So okay, in about 10 minutes or so, we'll come back together.
Okay, there we go. Ooh.
Look at that power you have, Sassoon, to just put people wherever, wherever you want.
It's making me nervous. I could actually broadcast message to all. I haven't seen that option before. And then can they come back to this room on their own, or how does that work?
I think you have to pull them back.
Or when I close the rooms?
Yeah, the breakout rooms.
Okay, I'm gonna give everyone 10 minutes.
Let's do, 10 minutes.
Okay.
Okay, so Nora, I'm just gonna go off camera for a little bit. It looks like we don't have anybody in here, so.
Oh, I see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 people here, but I have no idea if these are, everybody has their camera off. So I have no idea if these are people who need ASL interpretation and will come off camera to communicate with the interpreters, or if these are people who are like in the bathroom or not looking at the screen just yet. So we just want to say that if you are someone who communicates with ASL, we invite you to come on and communicate your ideas and thoughts about this particular scenario with our interpreters. Right now we have Nora, and we also have Juan, who may be switching off between each other.
Okay, so Wanda just said, okay, so Wanda's on a phone call, but then we have a few other people who we're not sure. Dana, Jackie, Larissa, Nadia, Simonette. What a beautiful name. Okay, Jackie's also on a phone call. So we have Dana, Simonette, and Larissa and Nadia. And if you missed the opportunity to be put in the room and you would like to be put in a room, just come off mute and let us know that as well. Gotcha. Nadia is watching us during work and can't participate in breakouts. Okay, thank you, Nadia. Yes, you're doing double duty. All right. We appreciate that. Yeah, you're welcome. So glad that you could be here, even if you're multitasking. Appreciate that.
So Yomi, I just want to remind you that you should take a break now too, because that was our plan. So if you need to like turn off for a minute and take some water or whatever, now's your time to do it.
I need a little coffee. Yeah, I'm gonna do that. Thank you.
Bianca, are you there?
Yes.
So should we let people back in, or what do you think?
Has it been 10 minutes yet? I can't remember what time we put them in the groups.
I think it's been 9 minutes.
Yeah, so I would send them that 1 minute reminder
Yeah.
that they can wrap up. Yeah.
Yep, I just sent the message.
Great. Thank you so much.
You know, usually there's this timer that happens, but there's no timer. I don't see any timer here.
I know there was just a new update to the platform. So I too am like, where's the thing? Why isn't it here? It's just, yeah.
No, they make so many changes without really, you know, notifying us. So we just close it now. We don't have the timer.
It's a countdown that the leave shows up, but we don't see it on our end, I don't think.
No.
Or it shows up on the breakout room box that shows up. I can't remember how it is. I definitely don't know what it looks like now.
Yeah, I'm just gonna close it.
Okay.
When Yomi comes back.
Great.
Okay, Yomi, it's been 10 minutes.
Okay.
Great.
Okay, I'm gonna close the rooms. Is that what? That's what I'm doing. I'm scared. Okay, I try to see if they can come back.
I think after the countdown, they just come back.
But there was no countdown option here.
I saw one pop up on my screen. I thought, okay.
I'm gonna close it.
Yeah,
right?
you just close it. Yeah. There's a Zoom update that's made things messy on my end.
Okay. Actually, now they're showing the countdown here. After I close, there's 1 minute countdown.
Okay, great. Great. Oh, so scary to have this power.
I think it's going so well. I don't want to mess it up.
Yeah, this is good.
Sorry, I'm gonna mute my.
Bianca, I love those glasses.
I wore them because you asked me to wear them.
I don't think I could ever pull it off, but yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. Oh, people are starting to come back.
So the reminder, there was 7 breakout rooms, but room 1 was us. So you want to start with, so 6 rooms that you want to check in with.
Okay. Hi, everybody. Welcome back.
Hello.
If you can keep your cameras on for this portion so we can all see each other and talk together, that would be great. And then you can go back into hiding if you want to. All right. So I don't know how the groups were kind of named or numbered, but if you could just indicate by raising your hand, like literally on camera or in chat, and let me know who, if you're the spokesperson for your group. Okay, I'm going to just start with the first hand that I see, Randolph. Hey, why don't you unmute yourself? Good morning.
Good morning.
Hey, so let me know, just talk to us. What did you all come up with?
Yeah, we discussed the first question, which and our answer was to like check in with the client because we want to give the client, you know, the power to decide whether or not they want the caregiver in the room because it's confidential, you know. I also suggested like yeah, now talk to the client first. Yeah.
Okay, thank you for that. All right, I thought I saw on Andrea Rios, your hand was up. All right. Hey.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
So I'm Andrea. I'm a navigator with the Family Justice Center. I'm at the Concord office. And I was in group 3, right? I think around this, our group, Maria. Yeah, okay. And what we shared, just like Randolph, was to ask the client if they want this person to come in with them. One thing that I've done in the past is if the support person is very adamant to be in that meeting, to have them join in and not fight them on it. Because once we're meeting and they kind of get comfortable with me, it makes it easier to ask the person to kind of leave the meeting halfway through so that I can still have that one-on-one. Another thing that was shared too is that if for some reason we're not able to separate them, even during that meeting, to let them know, okay, we're going to follow up with you later on, and then actually have a phone conversation and hope that that could be more confidential if this person is not there. But if we're able to from the get-go get them out, once we ask them, do you want this person to get in, and then maybe invite that person after, just so that they'll feel like they were part of the conversation. So those are just some of the ideas that were thrown in our group.
Good, good. All right, who's going next?
I can go next. My name is Jessica. I'm also from the Family Justice Center. I am a navigator at our Richmond Center. I don't necessarily remember our group number. I thought we were group 1, but I don't think so anymore. What we talked about was our experiences. So we had a couple of people in our group that was from the medical field, and kind of the different policies that kind of dictated how we would approach the situation. A couple of our participants had talked about HIPAA and just how that kind of navigated their way of separating the client from their support that would not want to be separated.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, good strategy. Anyone else? You can just unmute yourself. Okay.
I can go next. My name is Nasadi. I'm one of the navigators at the East Family Justice Center. So some of the common themes, like the other groups, is that we wanted it to be really client focused and talk directly to the client and letting them know ahead of time that we really wanted to be a confidential space for them. And something that I was suggesting is to show both the client and the support person, to show them the space at our office, to show the different rooms that we have. So I could show them both, okay, this is where we're going to have our client meeting, and this is the room that we have for support people, to get both of them acquainted with our space so they both know this is where we're going to be at. And really framing it in the beginning that we want it to be a productive meeting, and letting the support person know at the end, if they want to come in at the last 15 minutes, the client can then let them know some of the different things that we discussed. So then it gives the client the power to really share the information they want to share, because just because the support person is there doesn't necessarily mean they want them to know everything that's going on. With the example, we don't really know what agency they're going to, so it's really broad. So we want to make sure that the client's confidentiality is, supported. And another thing we suggested is at the end of our meeting to write down a list of the different resources that we're connecting the individual to. So then they know, okay, Mary from so-and-so and Sam from so-and-so is going to is going to reach out to you after to continue services.
Excellent. So these are really good approaches. I think we're going to move forward because I'm doing a time check. We're at 10:20. So if you didn't get a chance to share, somebody's really happy that they didn't have to speak, I think. I saw, oh, is that you, Chelsea? You're like, yay. So I'll be sure to call on you next time first. So if you didn't get a chance to share out, you're going to be put in the same group, and you will be the lead. You'll be the person to share out the second time. Okay.
And I also want to say that Grace put in the chat box to suggest having smaller groups. And what I'd like to offer is that since it's just easier right now on the back end for us to put you in the same groups, to just acknowledge if you were talking a lot during this first round, to maybe, take a step back and offer other folks an opportunity to share who may not have spoken as often. And that can be one way that we can compromise and have everyone's voice be included in that space. So thank you, Grace, for acknowledging that as we move forward. So I'm going to share my screen again. And what that means for me again is that Yomi will be the person who is going to share what's happening if we're asking a question. And so I'm going to go into present mode. And what you'll see is another poll that we have. And as this slide loads, the question is, what is ableism? And so just like the last two polls that we did at the beginning of our time together, we are going to have the same poll come up. So Sassoon, if you could put up that third and final poll of what is ableism, Yomi will read that out loud as well as the options. Yomi, could you do that, please?
Sure. So what is ableism? And this is, again, a very easy test. It's multiple choice. So the first choice is discrimination based on physical, mental, and/or communicative capacity, only having 12-point font, handouts in 12-point font, something only disabled people experience, or D, all of the above.
And I'll just read these options out loud again on what is ableism. The first option is discrimination based on physical, mental, and/or communicative capacity. Option 2, only having handouts in 12-point font. Option 3, something only disabled people experience. And option 4 is all of the above. And we'll give folks another 10 seconds before we close the poll. All right, so soon you can close the poll, please, and share with us the outcome. Great. So a majority of people selected the first option, discrimination based on physical, mental, and/or communicative capacity, followed by all of the above. And thank you so much. And the answer is all of the above. So if you chose one of the other answers, you were right too. So what Yomi and I would like to be able to offer with this particular poll is a reminder that ableism looks like so many different things at so many different times. And what we want to do is share with you a working definition that's created by disabled people of color. And this particular definition is big and long. And we also have a link to this source if you wanted to share it with people. And we have several slides at the end of this slide deck that has the resources and citations. So I'll read out loud what the definition of ableism is that we're working from. This is from T.L. Lewis, who is a Black disabled person and scholar. And they say a system that places value on people's bodies and minds based on societally constructed ideas of normalcy, intelligence, excellence, and productivity. These constructed ideas are deeply rooted in anti-Blackness, eugenics, colonialism, and capitalism. This form of systemic oppression leads to people and societies determining who is valuable and worthy based on a person's appearance and/or their ability to satisfactorily produce or reproduce, excel, and behave. You do not have to be disabled to experience ableism. And I think that last sentence is really important for us to highlight. And I'd love for Yomi to offer an example that she gave me last night, and I'll offer you another example that impacted me before I experienced my disability as well. So Yomi, can you give us an example of?
Yeah, a very common example of the way ableism just shows up in everyday society for all of us is when you think about job applications. And you think about the way when you look at, like, you go to apply for a job and it says, what do you need to do to be able to do this job? And it'll say, you must have a valid driver's license. Well, that excludes a huge portion of the population, A, that do not drive, when really what that employer probably wants, if the essential function of the job is not to be driving, maybe what they really need is just for you to have a valid ID. But yet they privilege and put in there that, no, we need a valid driver's license. So a lot of people that don't have driver's licenses they'll be discouraged from even applying for that job. Driving it doesn't have anything to do with the work requirements of that particular position, but we're so used to sort of this hierarchy and privileging people who have access to vehicles and who drive, that we tend to put that stupid requirement on so many forms and applications where it's not even necessary. That is a form of ableism that everybody experiences.
Yeah. And another example that I can also offer is, so you can't see it, but I'm 6 feet tall and I'm also a large person. And so what that looks like for me when I prior to having my disability was when I would go into a building or an office with a waiting room and there were chairs that were very close together. My knees would rub up against them. It wasn't comfortable, but also my hips were very wide and it wasn't a comfortable seating position. So thinking about, do your chairs and seatings have arms that make it difficult for larger body people to be comfortable in your space? And that be an example of ableism as well, where people can't access comfortably the seating. That's a requirement to be in the space with you. What we also want to then go through, and I think I'll turn it over to Yomi to go over these slides, are barriers for survivors when it comes to ableism. So Yomi, I believe the next couple of slides are yours.
Yeah.
Put myself
And I'll talk kind of quickly, and I think we're going to jump ahead a little bit because I'm looking at the time. We have one more activity. So here are some barriers for disabled survivors. It could be ineffective and inappropriate responses from community to the violence that we experience. And I'll just give a quick example of that. Sometimes, and we've seen it happen in the media, it happened in Oakland about, I think 6 years ago, where a man who was caring for a disabled family member ended up murdering that family member. And people talked about it as being one, a mercy killing, and one where people were feeling sorry for the murderer. And so really devaluing the person's life who was killed. And so this is a very inappropriate community response to violence that people with disabilities often experience, and it could be a barrier for why survivors don't come forward. Lack of resources or accommodations from service providers. I mentioned fear of institutionalization. So if I am receiving support at home to live independently, but the people providing that support, or maybe even somebody from the outside is abusing me and I come forward about that abuse, and so what happens when the state gets involved? Do they then strip away my independence, my ability to live independently? Do they determine that I need to be institutionalized? That might keep me from coming forward. And then just ignorance on the part of law enforcement, prosecutors, service providers, intervention specialists around just disability community, culture, our values, our norms, how we view our lives and what our lived experiences are. So I will just say, despite a high rate of crime against people with disabilities, many victim assistance agencies report that they rarely serve persons from this population. So I just want you to consider, does this suggest that people with disabilities are unaware of your services, or that the services available to them are inaccessible? Are law enforcement officers and victim service advocates being trained to recognize the needs of our community or to provide accommodations? What conditions prevent people with disabilities from reporting crimes and accessing services? So when you look at, there's a gap and a disparity. The statistics tell us that people with disabilities experience disproportionate rates of crime and victimization. And yet service providers say, well, we rarely serve people from this population. So we want you to interrogate the reason for that disconnect. Next slide, please. Quickly, other barriers could be that your hotline or your online resources are inaccessible to people with visual and hearing disabilities, and that's an easy fix. People with physical disabilities may lack the ability to travel to your office to receive help. So transportation is a major barrier and impediment in many disabled folks' lives. We may not be taken seriously when we bring forward experiences of abuse or victimization. People with intellectual and developmental disabilities may be unable to give statements, they may be unable to testify, and they may be viewed as just unreliable victims. or sources for information. Next slide, please. So now we're going to quickly go through some models of disability that so a lot of times when people think about the disability community and sort of our societal view and approaches to disability, we just see it in one way. But there are actually several models of disability that are at work and that intersect in our lives for good or for ill. And we just want to go over some of these models to make you aware and say, and this is not sort of to judge. If you fall into one of these categories, you don't have to identify yourself. We just want to bring it forward to raise your awareness so you can like stop doing it. Okay, so let's just quickly go through some of these models. We're going to spend more time on the justice model and the social model, but we're going to quickly go through the other ones. Next slide.
So I'll give you a break, Yomi. You've been talking a lot.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Here we have a slide which has several Barbies positioned in a variety of different ways. And the caption reads, "I organize social events for non-disabled people. This raises money to create jobs for non-disabled people. Then we provide the disabled people whom we think are deserving with the things that we think they need." And this is an example of the charity model. A really great example of what that looks like in action is the Jerry Lewis telethon that many of us may remember and have grown up with. And that is what the charity model has looked like in a variety of different ways. What came after or in alignment with the charity model was the medical model. The medical model of disability may be where many of us are still at. This image is of a doll, which is in a doctor's outfit with a white coat. There's a microscope, and then there's like some toy syringes and stethoscopes, etc. And the caption reads, "I invent and administer tests to classify disabled people according to what I think their impairments are. Then I carry out experiments to try to make them more like me." The medical model is also a little bit more complicated. It focuses on a diagnosis. It focuses on the pathology of what that looks like in action. It seeks a cure for the disabled person, and it identifies us as broken. And it also recognizes that the expert in the room is not the disabled person with the body mind, but it is the provider who is the medical provider usually. A really great example of what the medical model in action looks like is the consent law in the state of California. We have this link available in our resources section, but here one part of the definition is a person can be incapable of giving legal consent because of a mental disorder or developmental disability. So here we have a really great example of how the medical model is being used based on someone's diagnosis to make an assumption that the ways that we expect people to verbally communicate are just completely removed from people with certain disabilities. And the reality is that many people can communicate consent in a variety of different ways. In this example, the argument is, well, we just expect people to communicate in one particular way. And that is one of the ways that ableism becomes a challenge and an issue with the medical model. The administrative model. Here we have a Barbie doll in front of a computer monitor with a keyboard and a mouse. And this slide says, "I invent and administer tests to classify disabled people by what I think are their inabilities. Then I judge the minimum level of benefits and services that I think they need to survive." Yomi, do you want to add anything about the administrative model before I move on?
I would love to, because the administrative model is like the bane of the existence for so many people with disabilities, and I would say poor people writ large. So it's very familiar. Recipients of bureaucratic services, people with disabilities don't have avenues for self-direction under this model. We're classified by our inabilities, then judged and given the minimum level of benefits needed to survive. Public benefits can be a poverty trap for our community and just for low-income communities generally. The government is always up in your business, like all the time. And there are disincentives built into this system and this model against people working or climbing out of poverty or leading just self-fulfilled lives.
Great, thank you, Yomi.
Yep.
And then we have the social model where we'll be spending a little bit more time with. And here we have a Barbie doll that is in a power wheelchair. They are dressed and ready for a fight. They have a look on their face of determination. And behind them is a picture of a variety of differently disabled people who are protesting, either in wheelchairs and holding signs and smiling or screaming and being active. And the caption says, "I fight against prejudice, discrimination, and disabling environments. I fight for equal rights legislation and better health and social care provision. I also fight to eliminate the poverty, abuse, violence, and war that cause the majority of impairments." And so the social model is also a really important model because this is where we first started to see disabled people organize and resist certain forms of oppression and ableism, and also fight for change. And this model led to what we understand today to be the Americans with Disabilities Act that was signed in 1990 and was very popular because it was a bipartisan law that was enacted. It expanded the Civil Rights Act to protect people with disabilities in a very particular way. What it also looked like was it was mainly racially white people who were also wheelchair users, and it very much excluded a variety of different people with different disabilities. So for example, it excluded the deaf, hard of hearing, late deafened community. It also excluded the blind deaf community. So we have this language of autism. This is language that people in the deaf community acknowledge as a specific form of ableism that they experience because of the ways that they communicate. And so there is a hierarchy even within disability. And at this time, we saw that hierarchy in motion. And it also was who the media was targeting and whose story the media was also highlighting. And so what we also noticed with the social model of disability, which we are currently still in and which many of us still value, is, for example, if we're trying to gain access to your services and you're on the second floor and the elevator is out of order, if Yomi and I roll up in our wheelchairs, is it our bodies that are at fault, or is it the building that does not have a functional elevator that is at fault? And so here it was really opening up a conversation to understand that it's not the individual, it is the society that makes access debilitating and that makes it difficult for us to be contributing members of societies and our communities outside of our home. And we also want to acknowledge that the social model is one of the reasons why Yomi and I are able to be here today, not only alive and surviving and thriving, but also doing this work rooted in caring for our communities, educating people who care for our communities, and also collaborating. Yomi, do you want to add anything before I move on to the justice model?
I would say just to offer more information about the importance and the limits of the social model of disability. So the social model gave rise to the independent living movement, which was a game changer for people with disabilities in our country and laid the groundwork for justice and liberation for most, but not all, people with disabilities. So the independent living movement is about using the power of community to help each other and make changes and to increase empowerment regardless of the type of disability. That's the aspiration. So the disability rights movement is about laws and policy. But both the independent living movement and the disability rights movement often don't have good intersectional analysis at work. And so there leaves much to be desired in terms of really liberating and supporting the full range of people with disabilities under these two models, under the social model. So now we'll move on to what we view as the next level better model.
Yeah, so here we have the justice model of disability, which has an image of a Black disabled man named Leroy Moore, who lives here in Oakland, California, and he is shirtless and his hands are extended out in front of him. And it says, "All bodies are unique and essential. All bodies are whole. All bodies have strengths and needs that must be met. We are powerful, not despite the complexities of our bodies, but because of them. We move together with no body left behind. This is disability justice. And disability justice is also a framework with a set of principles. And we're going to briefly go over these principles. And we've also offered you links to learn a little bit more. And there is a disability justice primer that we encourage all of you to purchase if you can. $7 PDF, $26 for a hard copy. That includes shipping. And it ships from here in California. The first principle is intersectionality, and intersectionality really acknowledges that there's power that impacts all of us, and that all of us have multiple identities, and that power shifts and changes. There isn't one way that we can do this work. We have to bring in all pieces of ourselves and the relationships that we have with ourselves into the space to really shift and create change. And so intersectionality is that first principle. The second one is leadership of those most impacted. And this is a really common principle for many different justice frameworks that you may be familiar with. And this basically says that if we really want to create change for communities that are experiencing oppression, we need to be led by those communities experiencing that oppression. We cannot be led by people who are well-intentioned and outsiders. And this is really essential in a variety of different organizing spaces. Also, anti-capitalism, which is number 3. And this is basically acknowledging that for many of us here in the United States specifically, we are expected to produce a particular thing like work and labor. And if we can't, we're considered disposable and not worthy or valuable. And so an anti-capitalist approach is really essential for disabled people because many of us do not fit into the normative ideas of what we are supposed to produce and experience. What it looks like to embrace an anti-capitalist approach in the work that you do, even if we are living in a capitalist society, for example, is to take your vacation days, take your sick days where you're not feeling well, take a mental health day when it's a hard day for you. And the fact that Yomi and I are advocating rest as a radical act of disability justice really is a reminder of the simplicity of what it looks like and what it means for us to access care and also to take care of our body and minds. Cross-movement organizing means we have to work across movements, and we can't just do this with one movement. Wholeness challenges that medical model of our ideas that we're not broken, we're whole. Sustainability is pacing ourselves and to really think long-term and how can we do this work long-term. Cross-disability solidarity is about ensuring that we're building connections with community members who have different disabilities. And if we are not including the autistic community, are we really doing cross-disability organizing, for example? And interdependence is one of my favorite. It basically says we can't do this alone. We need to do this work collectively. Many disabled people have care workers or personal assistants that work with them. And also we need each other as community. This is one of the reasons why, if we haven't been modeling this yet, hopefully we can identify this. Yomi and I are leaning on each other to be able to guide this. We're also leaning on Sassoon to also offer this space. So these are some examples of interdependence to do this work. And the goals are collective access and collective liberation, right? So these are things that we're striving for. And it's really the idea of what happens when everybody's needs are met. What will it look like to do this work if all of our needs are met? And that is what liberation can look like as we move forward in freedom. And so I know it was a quick overview. Yomi, do you want to add anything before we go to the next?
I would just like to say the reason that we're introducing this framework to you is because we believe that you will be much more effective in your work and in your mission if you understand the disability justice framework, and if you can figure out ways through working with leadership of those most impacted to apply this to your work and to shift the way that you work. I think that you will be much more successful in outreach to marginalized communities, multiply marginalized communities, but also there may be some people that you come in contact with, such as victims, that this is the political space and the personal space of through which we view the world and how we live our lives. And so if your services don't embrace this, then we're probably not going to use your services. So let's move forward, and we're going to do one more activity and then we're going to be closing. So again, we're going to read the scenario to you. You'll be assigned to the same group. And this time we're going to ask you to respond to 3 questions. And the same person that you selected to report out will be the person that will raise their hand. And if you didn't get a chance to report out during the first activity, then I'd like to call on you for the second one. So Chelsea, you did not escape this. So again, let me just read the scenario. A 24-year-old disabled client with cerebral palsy is referred to your agency for intake. They are driven by someone who is an attendant, possibly, who will not leave their side. How do you handle this being confidential? So the questions that we want you to answer, and if somebody could put those in the chat, Bianca, if you could put those in the chat. How do you figure out who the person with them is? How do you ensure privacy and autonomy of the client? And how do you offer access support? So an example will be the person with them might be the person that helps them get a drink of water, that might help clear their trach, that might help them adjust in their wheelchair. How do you, as a service provider, approach providing that access support? So we'll see you in 10 minutes.
Great. So Juan, Yomi, Sassoon, this is our break time. So let's take like 7 minutes. I know that Yomi said 10 minutes, but I think just based on time, we should probably just give them 7 minutes. Oh, and Nita, I didn't get a group option. Sassoon,
Right.
could you add Nita to a group?
Yeah.
Great.
So I had 2 people unassigned, so I moved them. Yeah. Okay, so 10:53, 4, tell me what time you want me to.
Yeah, 10:53 I think is good for that 1 minute countdown thing and to bring them back. Then we'll hear from people and then we'll open it up for questions. So we have a little bit of time for questions and then we'll be done.
Yeah, I think it makes sense because it's the same group and kind of the same scenario, different questions. So, okay, 10:53 it is.
And Bianca, if you need to cut out like right at 11, I can sort of wrap things up with Sassoon at the end.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you so much.
Okay, it's been great. I really love that definition.
Thank you. So glad that it's helpful and useful.
All right, I'm back. Oh, you're muted.
Okay, so at 10:52, I'm gonna give them 1 minute.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay.
Are you in the office soon? Or
Yeah,
yeah.
we are back. We actually have never closed.
Oh,
We
okay.
stayed open this whole time.
Okay.
Yeah, but with a lot of different, protocols in place.
Yeah.
There we go. I gave them a minute.
Okay.
Yeah. And so far we have stayed safe, but the community spread is quite,
It's so scary.
yeah.
We keep going backwards. Every time I think, oh, we're getting better, now everything's shut down again. I've been COVID tested so many times. I'm so sick of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
There's a saying that we didn't give a group option, group 7, huh?
Oh, that was Nita. That was one of the people before we took our little break that I think you put in another group. Yeah.
I thought I did, but okay.
Yeah.
yeah, I
That
think
happened. Yeah, that was a comment that Nita put in the chat box. I think right as you were putting her in a different.
Oh,
group.
okay,
Don't
yeah,
worry
okay,
about it.
got
did
you.
it.
Because there are some people who didn't join their breakout groups, but all right,
Yeah.
it's so good. People are coming back.
Great.
Nice to see you, Celine. She's in the office too today.
hi, everybody. Welcome back. Oh, it's like Hollywood Squares. I don't know if people are old enough to remember that game.
I love seeing faces.
Yeah, it's nice.
Yeah.
Yes, Anita missed group 7. There was a little error and a glitch in the matrix.
Yep.
Getting Nita to the group. So we're going to do the same thing that we did last time, where Yomi is going to call on some folks.
And we've lost some participants, I think. I don't know if people had to drop off or maybe it's just the non-video participants. But so Chelsea, I'm looking at you.
I know. Hello.
All right.
So part of the answers to these questions we actually talked about in our first group, but we missed our folks who didn't make it back. We thought about you, we missed you. So the how do you figure out who the person is, I think was a group of things, including just asking. And then if we can have some time with the client alone asking, but also being specific. So not just like, that's my support person, but like, what are the ways that they support you? And I know folks talked about having someone leave and come at the end, but actually Yomi and Bianca, in a different conversation, we're talking about like privacy, and that some folks their support people might be people who like physically touch them or assist them in ways that I should not assume that I will do, or that they won't need during the meeting. So just asking some more specific questions, and then also offering that someone could come and go. Like we could take breaks, your support person could come back in, and then we could continue the meeting rather than having it either or. So just having flexible plans. And then the access needs, I think, is like asking directly in whatever ways we can communicate what those look like, and then being willing to have like a flexible plan in our mind about what we're going to get done today or how we're going to get it done. Because I think that's a barrier for some folks, is like we have a pace and a direction that we kind of know we're going in, and we do it a lot of times in a day. And so just being willing to like open that up a little bit and not have someone hit the wall of our expectations. And then my group really wants to say that documentation for a lot of the folks in my group are important. So just keeping track of who's there and having their name and information and documenting that as part of our process is important for some of the folks in my group. So they wanted me to mention.
Excellent.
Okay, group 7. Love you.
And I would say that flexibility of being able to go outside of your normal processes and protocols, that is an accommodation. And also, like what we do in the health system that I work for Sutter Health, we have an accommodations questions that we ask every time patients make a doctor's appointment. So we ask people in advance what accommodations they need. That way our clinical teams, our staff are sort of ready. We can like be prepared to assist and provide that accommodation so that people aren't just sort of stunned and shocked when someone shows up and needs XYZ. It's like we can anticipate their needs. So that might be one way to handle it. So very good for that group. Is there anybody else that wants to report out who didn't get a chance to the first time? Grace? Oh, wait, making sure the client consumer is able to voice what their needs are. Yeah, what do they need to be present? Do they need an interpreter? Is there a need for other assistive devices? If there is not enough time to meet, allowing for another meeting time with client and the consumer absolutely to be heard and voice their needs in a second appointment. So that's really good flexibility. Anyone else before we move on? I was wondering, like, were you thinking about a disability justice framework or approach when the scenario came up the second time? It's okay if you weren't yet, but just wondering. Okay. Great. I see a lot of head nods. Okay. So Bianca, if Bianca can share, first of all, just really good work. And thank you just for being present and engaging on this with all of us. If Bianca could please put up the slide deck at the end, we're done with that second activity. And we're going to be closing out soon in another minute or so. We want to just leave space for any additional questions, feedback, comments, feelings that you might have. We're going to go to the next slide about homework. I'm just going to talk about this for a minute, but if you have feedback or input that you would like to provide, you can add it to the chat and we can read that out, or you can raise your hand and I'll get to you. So the takeaways today that we hope for you would be just some homework. Think about what shifts need to be made to your programs and services to make them more inclusive and less ableist. So some suggestions or examples might be implementing disability-focused policies and procedures, and people most impacted, subject matter experts, should be leading that work. Training your staff and how to work with people with specific disabilities, hiring victim advocates and subject matter experts dedicated to outreach to people with disabilities, or just doing simple accessibility improvements, such as making sure your promotional materials are available in alternative formats. So these are just some suggestions for ways that you can make some shifts in your organization. And so let's see if there are any questions. Thank you, Damali. Informative presentation. Thank you. And we appreciate your presence here.
I'm also going to stop sharing my screen so that we can see each other if we have questions. And also, I do have that hard stop at 11. So I just wanted to remind people that you will have access to these slides if you don't already have them now. Our team support Family Justice Center will send them out. And it does have the contact information for myself and Yomi. If you decide that part of that homework is you need more help, Yomi and I are available. We can connect you. We can also create support as well. So thank you so much, Sassoon and Family Justice Center, for organizing this. And everybody who shows up at work during a pandemic, we thank you for your service and your care and attention. We value you and you're worthy of this attention and care.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're open to questions that might show up, and you might also see me log off really quickly. So
I like what Dana just put in the chat. Like, thank you for giving me better language to use. Thank you for naming that, Dana. You were familiar with several of the disability models, so that's great. But yeah, proper language connotes respect and value to communities. So thank you for calling that out and naming that. All right. It was wonderful to be in this space with all of you.
Yeah, thank you, Bianca, for being here and for your wonderful presentation. And I hope to see you soon. I know you gotta go, so we'll definitely have a follow-up conversation about what we want to do next. I certainly thought that I would like to learn more about disability justice and how we could weave in some of our scenarios in the disability justice context. So I think that we definitely need to have one more workshop. That's what I'm thinking.
Yeah,
Yes,
and I would
Chelsea?
also say for disability justice framework, what you also might consider is ways that disabled survivors might want to approach healing and wholeness. It might be a restorative justice model, something like that that doesn't involve the carceral state, or just being open to different ways of resolving some of these issues for survivors. So thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful rest of your day and stay safe.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. And you will be getting the PowerPoint slide deck along with an evaluation form that we'll be asking you to fill out. Thank you.
Thank
Be
you.
safe.
Bye, Yomi.
Bye. Bye, everyone. Yeah, restorative justice. I know a lot of people are talking about it more recently, with the Black Lives Matter movement and the Reimagine Public Safety movement.
Yeah.
But in reality, it's really difficult project or difficult practice. I mean, we have a project, we have a pilot project, and Chelsea is the lead. I don't know if you know about it. But,
no, I didn't know about the pilot part.
Oh,
but
yeah. No,
yeah,
we are doing that right now with Mimi Kim and Sujata.
that's wonderful.
Yeah, this is our second or third year.
Okay.
Okay, Nora, I think you could stop, right? Thank you so much.
Thank you, Nora.
Thank you, Huang.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Juan.
Bye.
This was great, Sassoon. Thank you for having us here.
Yeah, for sure. I think this was really helpful. And let's see, stop recording. Because